Hi, I wanted to talk today about artist materials. Um, this video is for beginners, for people that are considering starting a journey in art or who have recently begun. And I'm going to make some videos about some materials, specifically paints and all the equipment that's needed, the brushes, the easels and all that sort of thing. But today I thought I would just pretty much talk about pencils, the pencil, as an example of how any material or medium that you choose in art for doing art, that it's very, very expansive and that there'll be almost an infinite choice um, with whatever medium you've decided you're drawn to, be it watercolors, acrylics, oil paints, pastels, colored pencils, paint pens, inks, all these sort of things. And each of those materials, those mediums, have an almost infinite variety of choice within them. And again, that will which will be which will suit whatever it is you want to do, how you feel most comfortable working. Um, because it's not just about the kind of art that you want to produce. I guess in a sense that's sort of almost the initial impetus, but maybe not always. Um, it's also about how do you want to work? What kind of space and environment do you want to work with? So with something like oil paints, there is you need a lot of equipment and quite a lot of space. You'll need space for palettes and mixing areas and for all your paints and all your brushes and all the mediums that you might want to add to your paint, such as linseed oil, turpentine, other oils, other mediums that either slow down the drying process or speed it up or give a different finish once it's dried. Um, and so, yeah, that's true with kind of every area within art. It's very much like craft people in general um, can get almost obsessive about collecting materials and equipment. Everyone kind of, you start off with the basics, and then as you progress, you'll find you'll do things to get a certain effect, and you'll learn about how to use that piece of equipment to get that effect. But then you'll find you could just go out and buy a thing that does that effect. That's kind of the world we live in today. Um, so yeah, there's just an infinite choice. Um, there's, so in other words, there's everything to suit your needs specifically. So anyway, I thought I'd just cover the pencil today because that is a good starting point. Now, not everybody starts by drawing. You don't have to. There may even be advantages to starting with paint if painting is what you want to do. Um, but for those that do want to learn to draw and who want to have that kind of artistic journey where you're learning the basics about perspective and proportion and tone and those sort of things, you learn all that with drawing. Or not that you learn it, it gives you a very good grounding in all those aspects of uh, representational art, trying to represent what you see. Learning to draw does give you an extremely good grounding in all that. But it's not necessarily essential, but it is very recommended. So anyway, when it comes to pencils, they come in 20 different hardnesses. So the hardest pencil is a 9H and gives a very, very pale line. Um, and the softest pencil is 9B. Um, in the middle, for some reason, between, I think, what do? We go down to H, 9H to H. Then there's an F, I believe, and then HB, and then B. I don't know why the F exists. I actually drew with an F pencil for 2 or 3 years once, just because it was an F. I just quite liked the fact that it was this odd pencil. But actually, I find it's a little bit hard most of the times, but not always. So anyway, you have this huge choice in hardnesses and softnesses of graphite lead pencils. Um, Even a 9B, the softest, darkest pencil, is actually still producing a kind of silvery grey line. Pencils don't produce anything even close to a black, really. If you use a black pencil, a black crayon pencil, a coloured pencil that is black, it's completely different to a graphite or lead pencil. the two tend not to be able to be used together because they look so different. If you want to make your blackest black even darker, and sometimes that's very useful to be able to do that, then you can add either mineral spirits or linseed oil to ground up graphite powder, which you can buy or make your own. You can buy pencils that are just solid graphite; they have no wooden casing, and you can grind use a piece of sandpaper and create powder. Add a few drops of linseed oil or mineral spirit, and then use a makeup sponge to apply it to your paper, and it gives a much blacker effect, which is, can be very, very useful. And because you're using either oil or mineral spirit, it won't buckle the paper in the same way that water would do. So besides the standard stick pencils that have a wooden case, as I say, you can get them without the wooden case, again in different thicknesses, different hardnesses and softnesses. Then there's things like clutch pencils, which are the kind of the pencil where you push the end and a claw comes out the end and it grabs. You have a stick of graphite fed into the pencil and it kind of grabs it, and so you press the thing at the end and it releases a little bit more. It's similar to a mechanical pencil, which is more where you press the end and it just feeds out a little piece of lead each time you press the button. And so as it gets short, you just press again and feed out a little bit more, similar to the clutch pencil. So that's, and that's similar to Rotring pencils. They're the same thing. When it comes to sharpening pencils, for the H pencils, a pencil sharpener is fine. But with the softer pencils, by the time, for anything that's 4B, 3 or 4B and above, you'll almost certainly want to use a scalpel, because the graphite will tend to break in a pencil sharpener. The tip will just keep breaking off every time you try and do it. So you have to use a scalpel, and that's a little bit of, you have to learn how to do that quite gently, because again, it's easy to break the tip. The other method that is preferred by a lot of professional artists is sandpaper. So you simply rub your pencil whilst turning it on sandpaper, and that produces a very nice long point. You can expose much more graphite to work with, and a lot of sort of more experienced drawers and artists kind of prefer that. So yes, pencil sharpeners, scalpels, sandpaper, all the different hardnesses and softnesses of pencils. We've covered that. We've covered the sharpnesses, the sharpeners. Erasers, it's a similar thing. So you have your standard rubber erasers, very useful. Then you have putty rubbers, which people tend to use more with charcoal. A putty rubber is just softer and stickier than a rubber eraser. So you tend to kind of almost stick the putty rubber to the paper and pull off the graphite that you don't want on there. You also get mechanical erasers, like the mechanical pencil, where you press the end and a little piece of eraser comes out the end and you can work with it. And then there are electronic versions of that, where there's a button that you press, and then the little tip of eraser that is exposed spins very, very fast. And with that, you can do very fine details like white hairs on a dark background, or the highlight in an eye, something like that. So those kind of erasers are incredibly useful. Now, as a rule of thumb, when you start out to draw, you're doing it to learn about perspective and proportion and how to translate what you're seeing in the three-dimensional world onto a flat surface, and drawing is fantastic for that. Ideally, what you should try and do is to draw without using an eraser, because, and it's a strange thing, it's a psychological thing. If you go out to draw and you have a sketch pad, your pencils and an eraser, the chances are you'll use that eraser. You'll make mistakes early on and you'll rub them out, or you'll make a little mark that you don't really want there and you'll want to remove it. If you simply draw without an eraser, then what you'll find is you'll simply make less erroneous marks. It will happen less often. However, at the same time, you will use an eraser. An eraser is a very useful tool just for getting rid of mistakes and rubbing stuff out. But what you really are, what you want to be aiming towards, and what will just happen by itself anyway, is that you'll learn how to use an eraser as a tool rather than a correction implement, an implement of correction. You'll use it as a tool in itself to literally draw with, in a sense. And that's, yeah, so like I say, putting highlights onto things rather than leaving a piece of paper white and working around it because that's where your highlight is. I mean, sometimes you can do that and you will do that, and other times it's simply more appropriate, far easier to use something like an electric razor to put in all these details and highlights that you kind of want to achieve. So yeah, I think pencils, sharpening methods, eraser methods. The only other aspect really to drawing and pencils is paper, and that is a topic on its own. However, what I will say is it is the thing that will make all the difference in the world to what you're working on, to your drawing. The texture that paper has, or the lack of texture that the paper has, it can be either way, will make all the difference to how the graphite comes off of the stick onto the paper. I've done lots of drawings over the years that really I was just very unhappy with because I'd used the wrong paper. There was either too much texture in the paper for the kind of pencil I was using, or there wasn't enough texture in the paper for the kind of pencil I was using. So again, that all comes down to what effect you want to achieve. And you kind of, yes, that's trial and error. You just learn by doing it. There's no substitute for doing. Nobody wants to show you how to draw a line or how to paint with a brush. It's more about giving those examples of these are the kinds of, here's the materials, here's the equipment, and then it's just down to you to kind of experiment and play. I think in that aspect, I tend to think that all artists are self-taught, even if they went to art school. I didn't, I'm self-taught artist. But even artists that go to art school, it's not like the teacher is actually showing them how to apply paint with the brush to the canvas. That the student learns for themselves. And every artist, if you stick at it, you tend to find you'll discover methods and techniques over the years, hundreds, thousands of them potentially. But what you're really doing is you're simply rediscovering what other artists have also discovered in their own time and in their own way and implemented in their own way. And that's all part of the fascination of the process. So anyway, I shall do more videos about more specifically about the materials and equipment such as easels and things, easels and brushes, the kind of surfaces that you can work on, from copper to canvas. There's an infinite choice. But I think, yeah, hopefully this video covered pencils enough as a starting point and as an example of how each material has almost an infinite selection of choice in it. For again, it's all down to what you want to achieve and how you want to work and how you want to go about it. So anyway, thanks for listening if you've got this far, and I shall try and upload something again soon about more materials and mediums and methods, and I'll try and include some examples of how these materials can be used. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.